The police sirens cut through the morning air. A crowd gathered around a shattered car window in a quiet Chicago neighborhood. A middle-aged woman sobbed, pointing down the street. "They stole my purse! They just drove off!" The crowd buzzed with panic. Amid them stood a thin, 13-year-old girl clutching a sack of newspapers she hadn't yet delivered. Her wide eyes locked on the car, disappearing into the distance. Under her breath, she whispered the license plate numbers. 7KD 4921. A police officer turned, exasperated. "Kid, you don't know what you're talking about. Go home. Leave this to the grown-ups." But the girl didn't move. She pulled out a stubby pencil and a crumpled notebook. Her hand trembled only slightly as she began sketching, each line sharp and deliberate. Slowly, a face took shape. The face of the thief. The officer stopped mid-sentence. The crowd went silent. This was Emily, the newspaper girl nobody took seriously. Until now. The morning air in Chicago's South Side carried a chill that never seemed to fade, even in early spring. The streets were still wet from last night's rain, shimmering under the pale glow of the street lamps that hadn't yet shut off. Emily Dawson balanced herself on her old bicycle, the wicker basket up front stacked with neatly folded newspapers. At only 13, her skinny arms and legs were already hardened by routine, by the endless rhythm of pedaling up and down cracked sidewalks before the city was fully awake. Her job was simple: deliver the Chicago Tribune to every doorstep on her route before 7 o'clock. But to Emily, it wasn't just a job. It was survival. The extra $40 a week meant groceries on the table, bus fare for her mother to get to work, or sometimes, on the rarest of weeks, new shoes that weren't bought secondhand. Neighbors would watch her dart across the streets and shake their heads. "There goes the little errand girl again," they'd mutter, half amused, half dismissive. To most of them, Emily was just background noise, a kid who worked too much and dreamed too little. Yet behind the surface, Emily harbored something no one bothered to see. Life at home. The Dawsons lived in a third-floor apartment that smelled perpetually of boiled cabbage and floor cleaner. Paint peeled off the windowsills, and the hallway light flickered like a tired pulse. Emily's mother, Margaret, worked double shifts at the diner on 47th Street, her apron stained with grease that never fully washed out. She would kiss Emily goodbye before dawn, leaving her daughter to lock the door behind her before hopping on her bike. Her father was long gone, vanished when Emily was only 6. She had vague memories of his laugh, a deep sound that rattled through their tiny home like thunder. But she remembered, too, the nights of yelling, the slammed doors, and the morning he never returned. For Emily, life became a rhythm of responsibilities too heavy for her age. School, chores, caring for herself, and the newspaper route that kept them afloat. She never complained, though. She had learned early that complaining didn't put food on the table. Still, hidden within the exhaustion, there was a small flame, something that kept her alive beyond the struggle. The secret room. Her bedroom was small, barely large enough for a twin bed, a dresser with a broken drawer, and a desk scavenged from a garage sale. But to Emily, it was a sanctuary. The walls, patched with fading blue paint, were covered in sketches, charcoal portraits of neighbors she'd glimpsed on the street, pencil drawings of classmates caught in moments they thought no one noticed, and even portraits of her mother asleep on the couch, her face softened in rest. On the desk lay the tools of her secret world. A cracked box of colored pencils, worn brushes, and scraps of paper she collected from anywhere she could. Old grocery bags, the backs of flyers, even napkins smoothed flat. Drawing was the one place Emily felt entirely free. With each stroke, she captured details others overlooked. The tired crease at the corner of a man's eyes, the subtle tilt of a girl's smile, the faint scar hidden under a fringe of hair. Her art teacher, Mrs. Whitmore, had once stopped her after class, holding a sketch Emily had turned in for an assignment. "This isn't just talent," Mrs. Whitmore had whispered, almost to herself. "This is vision." Emily had blushed, shrugging off the praise, but deep down she clung to it. That validation was one of the few sparks of belief she had in herself. She had even entered a state-level art contest the year before, anonymously, because she didn't want anyone at school to laugh at her. To her shock, she had won first place. The certificate still sat in a shoebox under her bed, unseen by anyone but her. Yet none of this mattered to the people in her neighborhood. To them, she was just the kid who delivered their news. A morning like any other. On this particular Thursday, Emily tightened her scarf against the wind and pedaled harder. Her breath clouded in the air as she reached into her sack, tossing newspapers with practiced precision. Each thump against a porch, each rustle against a door, was part of the routine she knew by heart. She passed by Mrs. Hanley's house, the widow who always waved from her kitchen window. Then Mr. Rodriguez's stoop, where the smell of coffee already drifted into the street. She knew the rhythms of these homes, the little habits of their residents, as if she were both invisible observer and silent participant in their lives. What Emily didn't know was that today would not be routine. Today, her hidden talent, the one nobody cared about, would burst into the open, the weight of being invisible. At school, invisibility was both a blessing and a curse. Emily wasn't bullied the way some kids were. She was simply overlooked. Teachers knew her as quiet, diligent, average. Classmates knew her as the newspaper girl and little else. Sometimes, when kids talked about their weekend trips to the mall or their new video games, Emily would stay silent, fingers smudged with graphite under the desk, sketching their faces instead. She felt safer behind the page, where people couldn't judge her as easily. But deep down, she ached for more. Not fame, not recognition, just the chance for someone to look at her art and see her. Not the errand girl, not the quiet kid, but the girl who noticed, who captured, who created. The echo of hunger. That morning, as Emily pedaled toward the last row of houses, her stomach growled. Breakfast was half a piece of toast, the other half left for her mother when she returned from her shift. Hunger was a constant companion, but Emily had learned to tame it, the way one tames an annoying sibling. She adjusted her scarf, focused on the road ahead, and told herself she would eat later. She didn't know she would soon forget hunger entirely, because something far greater was about to demand her attention. Foreshadowing. Up ahead, the city began to stir. Buses roaring, store owners unlocking their doors, workers hurrying to catch trains. Emily pedaled past a small diner, the one where her mother sometimes worked, and glanced inside. She imagined her mother wiping counters, laughing tiredly at some customer's joke, shoulders heavy with fatigue. It was in that moment, distracted yet attentive, that Emily saw a black sedan roll slowly to a stop at the intersection. The windows were tinted, the engine idled low, and her instincts prickled. Something was off, but she shook it away. She was just a kid delivering newspapers. What did she know? The black sedan eased to a stop as if it belonged there, casual, unhurried, almost bored. Its engine purred under the street's thin veil of morning, and from where Emily coasted on her bicycle, she felt something in the air tighten. She couldn't have said why. Maybe it was the way the driver didn't check his mirrors, or how the passenger's silhouette leaned forward before the car even settled. Maybe it was the neighborhood's own way of telling her, pay attention. Her front tire thumped a crack in the curb. She steadied the handlebars and lifted one foot to the ground, the wicker basket groaning softly with newspapers. A block ahead, the crosswalk signal blinked a red hand. Two commuters hurried past, coffee cups steaming, collars popped against the wind. A dog barked from a balcony. It was all painfully ordinary until the back door of the sedan flew open. The man who sprang out moved with an athletic efficiency. Not the flailing rush of someone improvising a bad choice, but the controlled glide of someone who'd done this before. Emily clocked the first details without meaning to. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Tall, but not looming. A runner's build. Navy hoodie zipped to the throat. A baseball cap pulled low. He didn't quite sprint. He measured the distance, cut left around a bus stop, and closed in on a woman stepping off the curb with a purse looped over her shoulder. "Hey!" someone yelled. The sound shattered the morning. The man's hand hooked the purse strap in one clean motion. The woman, mid-40s, hair pulled into a quick bun, a reusable grocery bag on her other arm, tightened instinctively. For one suspended half-second, their bodies locked, momentum against resistance, greed against disbelief. Then the strap gave. She stumbled backward and went down hard on one knee. The man pivoted and ran. Time changed shape. Emily's hearing sharpened to the tinny rattle of the sedan's license plate frame as the engine revved. She registered the smell of sour exhaust, the hiss of a distant bus air brake, the gasped, "Oh my God!" rippling along the sidewalk. Her eyes chased the man's profile in motion, jawline like a cut stone, the brim of his cap curved but not new, the hoodie's drawstrings uneven, the left one longer by an inch. When he dodged a trash can, the hem of the hoodie flashed up just enough to show the glint of a chain at his waist. Not jewelry. A keychain? No. Too flat. Probably a ring of car keys hooked to a belt loop. The sedan rolled forward. The man didn't sprint to it. He angled his path so the car met him like a catcher receiving a ball. In that moment, the cap tipped back a fraction. Sunlight struck skin. There, a pale crescent near the left ear, just behind the hinge of the jaw. Not a fresh mark. A healed scar, small as a fingernail clipping. He yanked the back door, collapsed into the seat, and the sedan lunged into traffic. Emily's mouth moved before she knew it was moving. The numbers fell out like beads. 7, K, D, 4, 9, 2, 1. Her lips shaped them silently once more, then again, stamping them into the page of her mind. 7KD4921. She repeated them the way she'd learned to repeat shadow and highlight, until they stopped being symbols and became fact. The woman was crying now, hands pressed flat to the sidewalk, trying to push herself up. Her grocery bag had burst. Apples rolled toward the gutter, knocking against the curb with tiny, merry taps that felt obscene in their cheerfulness. A uniformed officer jogged from the corner, broad-shouldered, middle-aged, a sheen of surprise and irritation still clinging to him like fog. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" he asked, dropping to a knee. "My purse," the woman choked out, grabbing his sleeve. "They took my purse. There were cards, my phone." "Which way did they go?" He glanced down the street where the sedan had already become any car. All cars. The city was too practiced at swallowing its own. He clicked his radio. "Robbery, black sedan, last seen heading east on 45th. Possible 2 occupants." Voices bubbled up around them. He came out of nowhere. "Looked like a kid." "No, older." "Gray hoodie or navy?" "Baseball cap. Dark." "Couldn't see his face." Emily rolled her bicycle to the edge of the crowd and put down the kickstand. Her fingers had begun to go pins and needles with the clarity that sometimes came on when she drew. It was like the world flattened into crisp planes and edges, into negative space and proportion. She could see the man more clearly now than if he stood in front of her, the way his mouth had tightened when the strap resisted, the particular cant of his eyebrows, the shallow flare of his nostril on the left when he'd sucked in a breath. She had memorized those features between 2 heartbeats, and they had stayed. "Make space," the officer called, standing. "Anyone get a plate?" "I did," Emily said. The words left her quietly and landed in the open air with more weight than she expected. 7KD4921, Illinois plate. He turned, eyes skimming over her until they barely caught. "Who said that?" When he saw the speaker was a kid, his face rearranged into the polite brusqueness adults reserve for inconvenient facts from small mouths. "How sure are you?" "Sure." She didn't add "I memorize values at a glance," because it always sounded like bragging when she tried to explain how it felt to see. She tapped the side of her head. "I said it out loud so I wouldn't lose it." He hesitated, then repeated it into his radio. "Possible plate 7KD 4921. Black sedan, 2 occupants." His gaze slid back to her, curious despite himself. "You saw anything else?" Emily nodded. "Scar near the left ear. Small. Here." She touched the hinge of her jaw. "He's used to running. Shoes squeaked wet on the asphalt, rubber worn. Right shoe was more worn on the outer edge. He's left-handed. He grabbed the strap left-handed. Hoodie navy, drawstrings uneven. There was a ring of keys at his belt, and he has a small chip on the front tooth, right side." Silence pressed at them, not truly quiet because buses still roared and someone still swore into a phone, but the kind of hush that follows when a group realizes the conversation they were having was the wrong one. "Kid," the officer said slowly, not unkindly. "That's a lot of detail for 2 seconds." "Not 2, Emily said. "More like 3.5. He gave a low breath that could have been a laugh if the morning wasn't bleeding. "All right. You got a name?" "Emily." She slid the strap of her bag off her shoulder and pulled out her notebook from the inner pocket, the one she kept for sketches and lists and faces that wouldn't let her go. The pencil was stubby, the wood chewed smooth near the tip where she worried it sometimes with her teeth. Her hands weren't steady. They rarely were at the start. But her eyes were steady, and that was what mattered. The victim, cheeks wet, a smudge of road dust on her knee, watched her with an expression that moved quickly from confusion to hope. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice both skeptical and longing, the sound a person makes when they want to believe in a magic that keeps proving false. "I'm going to draw him," Emily said. The officer's eyebrows lifted. "We can take statements. We've got cameras on the block." "Cameras blur. Memory doesn't," Emily answered, and immediately wished she hadn't sounded so sure. Her stomach twisted once, hard, but certainty, like graphite, only darkened when she pressed. She opened to a clean page. The first lines were the cage, light scaffolding for the skull, a faint cross to map sight lines, an oval for the jaw's weight. She blocked the cap brim, the arc of its shadow across the brow. The eyes were not shapes, not circles. They were angles between lids and light, the small tilt that gave him the faintly hunting look. She marked the brow, the slope of the nose with a quick hatching stroke, then cut the mouth, tight, slightly off-center, the chipped tooth interrupting the line at the right. She notched the ear. She carved the scar. The world fell away. Her pencil whispered and scratched. Someone coughed, a child sniffled, traffic sighed. She heard it all as texture and nothing more. She shaded the cheek where the cap's brim denied the sun. She deepened the crease that anger had drawn near his mouth when the strap resisted. She pulled his jaw forward with a broader sweep of the lead. She checked proportions, the eye width, the nose length, the space from lip to chin. It assembled itself as if from fog into a man. "Holy," someone breathed behind her, the word trailing off. "Let me see that," another voice said. Skeptical, then less so. Emily didn't look up. She didn't like interrupting the moment when a face crossed over from guessed to remembered. She softened the edges under the cap where the hair would disappear. She thickened the line where the hoodie bunched at the neck. She wrote the plate number in the margin, 7KD 4921. She circled it twice. "Kid," the officer said gently now, "can we—" His voice slowed, astonishment seeping in. "Can we get a look?" She lifted the notebook without standing and held it so he and the woman could see. The woman's breath hitched. The officer's jaw shifted, as if trying to fit two versions of reality together. The version where a kid couldn't possibly help, and the one where she already had. "That's him," the woman whispered. Her fingers trembled when she pointed at the scar. "I saw. God, I thought I imagined that." "Did you catch a logo? Shoes?" the officer asked, eyes still on the page. "Running shoes," Emily said. "Not brand new." The cap had a tiny embroidered rectangle, no letters, like the tag had been cut. Hoodie zipper started to fray. He favors his left foot on pivot, left-handed snatch, keys on the right hip so the keys clacked when he ran. Also, she hesitated, hearing how strange it sounded. "He smells like industrial cleaner. Not cologne, something chemical, and cigarettes. Not strong, old smoke." The officer nodded once, as if she'd confirmed a suspicion he hadn't formed yet. He thumbed his radio, gave the plate number again, then added, "Suspect may have left facial scar near left ear and slight chip right incisor." The dispatch operator asked him to repeat, and he did, almost proudly this time, like the details were something he'd earned. "Can we keep the drawing?" he asked, finally turning back to Emily. She blinked down at it. The page contained the man too well. It felt like handing over more than graphite. But she knew the point of a record was to be used, not hoarded. "Yes," she said, and tore it out carefully, smoothing the left edge where the paper teeth showed. She tucked the rest of the notebook back against her ribs. When she passed the drawing over, her fingers grazed the officer's. His palms were dry with cold and nerves. "I'm Officer Grant," he said, as if he owed her a name now that he had asked hers. "We'll get a statement. You on your way to school?" "After my route," she said, and gestured at the bicycle. The basket still waited, a quiet insistence that the world wanted its routines even when something important happened. The remaining newspapers lay square as bricks. A siren whooped in the distance, brief, like a throat being cleared. The crowd started to thin, the drama slackening into errands again. The woman collected her apples one by one, as if the carefulness could glue the morning back together. "Thank you," she said to Emily, sudden and fierce. "I thought no one saw me. I thought—" Her voice broke. She tried again. "Thank you." Emily didn't know what to do with the gratitude. She shrugged, flustered. I just paid attention." Officer Grant studied the drawing one more time, then slipped it into a clear evidence sleeve from his pocket as if it were a rare leaf. "I'm sending this in," he said, tapping his radio. "We'll compare with neighborhood cams. And the plate, if the kid's right." "I'm right," Emily said, softly but without apology. He caught her eye and, for the first time, didn't look away like she was a child asking to play cop. Something loosened at the corner of his mouth. "All right, Emily. I'll be in touch. Don't stray too far in case we need more details." She nodded, set her foot to the pedal, and pushed off. The bicycle rolled forward as her breath returned to its normal tempo. She reached the next porch, tossed a newspaper, and then the next, the ritual reasserting itself one delivery at a time. But the route had changed. The city had changed. She could feel it in the distance of the siren and in the sudden light grip of possibility that caught her ribs when she breathed too deep. At the corner by the diner, she glanced through the window and saw her mother wiping down a booth, hair tugged back by a rubber band that had seen better days. For an instant, Emily imagined a world where she walked in, said, "Mom, I helped," and her mother put down the rag and laughed with the same thunder that used to fill their home. She imagined a world where the officer would call and say, "We got him." And for once, the after didn't bring another bill or another apology or another door closing. It brought justice. It brought respect. Her hands were still inked with graphite smudges, the pads of her fingers a little gray. She rubbed them against her jeans and left faint, smoky streaks that made her look like she'd been playing in the ashes of last night's fire. Maybe she had. Behind her, Officer Grant walked the victim to the curb to file an official report. Ahead of her, the street pulled into a thin line that led to school, to the day's lessons, to the possible phone call that could tilt everything. She pedaled toward it, the morning opening like a sketchbook to a new page. She had no way of knowing that by noon her name would be floating through a precinct bullpen like a rumor, and that by evening the drawing would be sterile under fluorescent lights, while 3 detectives argued over whether a kid's memory should count. She didn't know that the security camera 2 blocks up had caught the suspect's cheek in a smear of pixels that would match the scar as neatly as a key in a lock. She only knew the cadence of delivery, the pleasure of a porch landing, and the ache in her legs that came when she earned her keep. And she knew, certain as graphite, that she had seen him, and that seeing mattered. At the last house, she slid the final paper into a black mailbox and turned her bike toward school. The clouds were thinning. The sun reached a little lower, as if curious about this girl with smudged hands and a license plate in her mouth like a prayer. By the time she chained the bicycle to the rack and shouldered her backpack, her phone buzzed. The screen flashed an unknown number. She stared at it, heart tripping, then answered. "Emily Dawson?" The voice had the echo of a room with too many phones. "This is Detective Alvarez at the 15th. Officer Grant passed along your sketch. We need you to come down and talk us through what you saw." She swallowed. "Now?" "If you can," Alvarez said. Then after a beat, with a warmth that acknowledged the size of the ask, "Please." Emily glanced at the school doors, at the cascade of students in hoodies and backpacks, at the posters for the spring talent show peeling slightly at their corners. She thought of her mother, of rent, of the way the city sometimes demanded grown-up decisions from people who were still learning long division. "I can come," she said. "Good," Alvarez replied. "And Emily, that drawing, people are talking. In a good way." The line clicked off. Emily stood for a second, balanced in the doorway between what her day had been and what it was becoming. Then she turned and started walking toward the bus stop that would take her to the station, to a room bright with fluorescence and doubt and possibility. The wind pulled at her scarf. She tightened it, tugging the ends snug. She walked faster. Somewhere in the city, a black sedan's engine cooled, ticking quietly. Somewhere else, a man with a small scar near his left ear lit a cigarette and thought he'd disappeared again. He hadn't. The precinct was colder than Emily expected, not just in temperature, though the air conditioning hummed relentlessly overhead, but in atmosphere, the kind of cold that came from fluorescent lights bouncing off linoleum floors and filing cabinets. The building had a way of swallowing noise. Phones rang, officers moved in and out, radios crackled, but everything felt muffled, like the walls absorbed energy instead of carrying it. Officer Grant walked Emily through the front desk, his large hand gesturing her gently forward like she was half guest, half burden. "This is the kid," he murmured to the woman at the desk, then leaned down to Emily. "Detectives are waiting upstairs. Just answer straight. Don't embellish. You did good out there." Did good. The words stuck with her as they climbed the narrow stairwell. For 13 years, Emily had been invisible, sometimes useful, rarely praised. The phrase was like a coat that didn't quite fit yet. She tugged her scarf tighter as if to keep it from slipping off. At the top of the stairs, a heavy door swung open into a bullpen where detectives hunched over desks littered with coffee cups, open files, and blinking computer screens. Conversations rose and fell in sharp bursts. For a moment, Emily stood still, overwhelmed by the sheer number of adults who seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Then a voice called out, "Officer Grant? You brought us the artist?" Detective Alvarez approached, a tall man with silver flecks in his dark hair and sharp eyes that seemed to weigh her from head to toe. Behind him trailed another detective, shorter, stockier, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. This one's expression was less curious and more skeptical, the kind of look adults reserved for children who claimed impossible things. Emily Dawson, Alvarez said, extending a hand. Thank you for coming. We're not in the business of dragging kids out of school unless we think it matters. Emily shook his hand, her palm small and slightly damp. I didn't mind, she said, though the knot in her stomach betrayed her. They led her into a windowless interview room, a table, 3 chairs, a tape recorder resting like a quiet threat in the center. Alvarez gestured for her to sit. The stockier detective dropped into the chair opposite her, folding his arms. This is Detective Harper, Alvarez said. He'll ask some questions, too. Harper grunted. So, Emily, you're our witness. Tell us again what you saw. The cross-examination. Emily repeated everything. The license plate, the scar, the uneven drawstrings, the chipped tooth. She described the way the man ran, how he grabbed with his left hand, how the keys jangled at his hip. As she spoke, Harper's eyebrows climbed higher until he finally leaned back, exhaling hard. 3.5 seconds, he said flatly. You expect us to believe you cataloged all that in 3.5 seconds? I didn't catalog, Emily replied quietly. I just saw. Harper smirked. Kids see things, sure. Imaginary friends, ghosts in closets. Doesn't mean they hold up in court. Harper, Alvarez warned, but his tone was mild. He wanted to see where this went. Emily opened her notebook and flipped to another sketch, her teacher in mid-sentence, captured weeks earlier during class. The likeness was uncanny, down to the way her lips pressed against her teeth as she pronounced an F. She pushed it across the table. I drew this in less than a minute, she said. From memory? Harper picked it up, squinting. His lips pressed into a line, but he didn't comment. Instead, Alvarez leaned forward. Emily, what made you notice the scar? He asked. It caught the light for just a second, she explained. When he turned, the brim of his cap lifted. Artists look for contrast, light against dark. That scar was pale against his skin. It stood out. Alvarez nodded slowly. And the tooth? He opened his mouth when he grabbed the purse, just a little, enough to show a chip. She gestured at her own incisor. Here. Harper tossed the sketch back onto the table. Even if she's right, it's still a kid's drawing. That's not evidence. It's a lead, Alvarez countered. He pressed a button on the small remote, and a monitor on the wall flickered to life. Grainy footage filled the screen, a bodega camera 2 blocks from the robbery. They watched as the sedan slowed, as a man stepped into frame for barely 2 seconds before the camera cut away. There. Alvarez froze the frame. That profile, jawline, scar, matches the sketch, don't you think? The image was blurry, pixels bleeding into one another, but Emily's heart leapt. Even in distortion, she recognized the angle of the brow, the shadow beneath the brim. That's him, she whispered. Harper leaned in, squinting. Could be anyone. Half the guys on the south side wear caps and hoodies. Not half with that scar, Alvarez said evenly. He tapped the remote, zooming in until the pixels grew chunky. See that faint line? Right where she said it would be. The breakthrough. At that moment, another detective rushed in, a folder in hand. We've got a hit on the plate, he announced. Car's registered to an address on the west side. Belongs to a Raymond Keller. Rap sheet includes petty theft, burglary, possession. Nothing major lately, but plenty of priors. Keller, Alvarez repeated, glancing at Emily. Sound familiar? She shook her head. The name meant nothing, but the face, she could never forget that face. The detective dropped the folder onto the table. A mugshot slid free. A man in his late 20s, jaw sharp, eyes defiant. And there, by his ear, the pale crescent of a scar. Emily's breath caught. That's him, she said without hesitation. Harper studied the photo, then Emily, then back to the photo. For the first time, doubt cracked in his eyes. Not doubt of her, but doubt of his own certainty. He tapped the picture. The scar. It lines up. Alvarez smiled faintly, not triumphant, but satisfied. Then we've got enough to move forward. Keller's been lying low, but not low enough. He turned to Emily. You've done something remarkable. Most adults wouldn't have noticed half of what you did. You gave us the lead we needed. Emily's cheeks burned. I just drew what I saw. And what you saw, Alvarez said, might stop a string of robberies from getting worse. Recognition and unease. As they wrapped up, Harper finally spoke, softer this time. Kid, Emily, you're not ordinary, are you? Emily blinked, unsure how to answer. I just like to draw. He huffed a laugh, shaking his head. Like to draw. Right. Grant appeared in the doorway, motioning her out. Come on, Emily. Let's get you back before your mom wonders where you vanished to. As she left the interview room, Emily felt a strange mix of pride and fear. Pride, because they believed her now. Fear, because belief came with weight. She wasn't just the newspaper girl anymore. She was a witness, a tool, maybe even a hero. And heroes didn't get to hide behind sketches on bedroom walls. In the bullpen, officers glanced up as she passed. Some nodded, some stared. For the first time in her life, the attention wasn't dismissive. It was respect, or something close to it. Yet the attention pressed heavy on her shoulders. When they reached the front desk, Alvarez caught up with her. He handed her a business card. If you remember anything else, anything at all, call me, and keep that notebook close. It may be more valuable than you realize. Emily slid the card into her pocket, fingers brushing the worn edges of her sketchbook. She nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the late afternoon sun had broken through the clouds. She blinked in the brightness, her breath visible in the cool air. For the first time, she wondered if the world would ever look the same again. The next morning, Emily woke not to her alarm but to her mother's voice calling from the living room. The tone was strange, half disbelief, half wonder. Emily, come here, honey. You need to see this. Emily stumbled out of bed, still in her oversized sweatshirt, her hair sticking up in wild tufts. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, but her mother wasn't holding a mug. Instead, she was pointing at the old television perched on a shaky stand. On screen, the Chicago Tribune logo spun, then cut to footage of a news anchor. In an extraordinary turn of events yesterday, a 13-year-old girl helped Chicago police identify a robbery suspect with a detailed sketch drawn from memory. Authorities credit Emily Dawson, a local newspaper delivery girl, with providing the breakthrough. The screen shifted, and Emily's drawing appeared, her sketch of Raymond Keller, taped to a police board. Beneath it, the anchor's voice continued. Officers say the sketch matched surveillance footage and led to a suspect's identification. Dawson, who is also a student at Lincoln Middle School, has shown an extraordinary eye for detail. Emily froze. Her name, her school, her drawing, all of it beamed out to thousands of homes. Her mother pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes watering. Emily, you did this? Emily swallowed hard. I just drew what I saw. Margaret pulled her daughter into her arms, hugging her tightly. For a moment, the heaviness of bills, double shifts, and worry lifted from her shoulders. Baby, I'm so proud of you. But pride was quickly joined by fear. If everyone knew Emily's name, what else would they expect of her? The neighborhood awakens. That morning's paper route was different. Usually, Emily moved like a shadow, tossing newspapers onto porches before anyone noticed. But now, doors opened before she even reached the steps. Mrs. Hanley, the widow who always waved from her kitchen window, stepped outside in her robe. There she is, she called, her voice shrill with excitement. "The little artist!" She clapped her hands as though Emily were a celebrity. Mr. Rodriguez leaned over his railing, coffee in hand. "Emily, mija, you're on the news. I told my wife I knew you were sharp." Others chimed in, voices overlapping. "Can we see the drawing? Did you really remember all that in seconds? You're amazing!" Emily forced a smile, handing out newspapers as quickly as she could. The admiration should have felt warm, but instead it prickled, like wearing a sweater 2 sizes too tight. For years, she had been invisible. Now, suddenly, she was under a spotlight she had never asked for. At school at Lincoln Middle School, the hallways buzzed. Emily had never been the center of attention. Now, heads turned as she walked past. "That's her," someone whispered. "She drew the guy. No way she did it that fast. She's like a genius or something." Her locker, usually just another gray metal door in a row of 100, was surrounded by curious faces. Kids who had ignored her before now wanted to talk. "Hey, Emily, can you draw me?" a boy asked, grinning. "Sketch my boyfriend," a girl giggled. Another classmate shoved a crumpled piece of paper at her. "Can you do me like one of those police sketches for fun?" Emily's cheeks burned. She mumbled excuses and pushed through, clutching her books tightly. In art class, Mrs. Whitmore's eyes glistened with pride. She held Emily's shoulders and whispered, "You've shown the world what I already knew. You're gifted, Emily. Don't let anyone make you forget that." But the praise didn't erase the gnawing pressure. It amplified it. The media storm. By afternoon, local reporters were waiting outside the school gates. Cameras clicked as Emily tried to hide behind her backpack. "Emily, how does it feel to be Chicago's youngest crime-stopping artist? Do you want to be a detective when you grow up? Can we get a picture of you holding your sketchbook?" She stammered, overwhelmed, until a teacher ushered her into the safety of the building. But the questions stuck in her ears, circling like hornets. At home, the phone rang nonstop. Neighbors wanted to congratulate her. Strangers wanted interviews. Even a local gallery called asking if Emily would consider displaying her sketches. Margaret tried to shield her daughter, but the attention seeped through every crack. Emily's life was no longer just hers. The weight of expectation. Days passed, and the attention didn't fade. Instead, it grew heavier. At school, classmates treated her like a novelty. Some were sincere, but others mocked her behind her back. "The little cop's pet," one boy sneered. "Bet she made it up." Teachers, too, started piling expectations. "Emily, maybe you could design the cover for the yearbook." "Emily, can you help with the school mural?" "Emily, would you show the class how you sketch from memory?" At first, she tried to comply, but the constant requests drained her. Drawing, once her sanctuary, began to feel like a performance. The sketchbook that had been her secret refuge was now a stage. One evening, after finishing her route, Emily collapsed on her bed and stared at the ceiling. She picked up her pencil, intending to draw as she always did, but her hand refused. The joy was gone, buried beneath everyone else's expectations. Her eyes burned. She pressed the pencil to the page anyway, but the lines shook. The face she tried to sketch blurred, wrong, untrue. With a frustrated cry, she snapped the pencil in half. Her mother's concern. Margaret found her daughter curled on the bed, eyes red. "What's wrong, baby?" "I don't want to be their hero," Emily whispered. "I just wanted to draw." Her mother sat beside her, stroking her hair. "People see something special in you, Emily. That can be scary. But don't let them take the part of it that belongs only to you." Emily sniffled. "But if I can help, should I?" Margaret sighed, her eyes heavy with the wisdom of someone who had carried too much. "Helping is good, but you're still a child. It's okay to say no sometimes. It's okay to just be Emily. A visit from Officer Grant. A week after the robbery, Officer Grant knocked on their apartment door. Emily's stomach twisted as she let him in. He handed her a folder. Inside was a printed news article. Police close in on robbery suspect thanks to young artist. Grant smiled faintly. We're close to making an arrest. Your drawing gave us enough to connect Keller to other thefts. You should know, you made a difference. Emily stared at the folder. The words should have made her proud. Instead, they made her feel small, like a gear in a machine too big to understand. Grant noticed her silence. It's a lot, isn't it? Everyone expecting you to be more than you asked for. Emily nodded. I just don't know if I can carry it. He crouched to her eye level. You don't have to carry it all. You already did enough. The rest is on us. His words lifted some of the weight, but not all. Emily realized she was caught between two worlds. The child who loved to draw, and the accidental hero who couldn't escape the spotlight. The neighborhood looked different to Emily now, though the bricks and sidewalks hadn't shifted an inch. The bakery on the corner still exhaled its yeasty breath at sunrise. The buses still rattled past with their metallic sighs, and kids still shouted in the schoolyard after the bell. But people's eyes, those had changed. When Emily pedaled down the block with her basket of newspapers, neighbors no longer looked through her. They looked at her. Some waved enthusiastically, others gave nods of respect, and a few even stopped her to shake her hand. Emily, our very own hero! Mr. Rodriguez boomed one morning, thrusting a bag of churros into her basket. On the house, mija, for all you've done. She mumbled a thank you, cheeks hot, and pedaled away quickly. Each gesture of kindness should have felt good, and in small bursts it did. But beneath it all lay the unsettling truth. People no longer saw her as Emily, the quiet girl with graphite smudges on her fingers. They saw her as the artist who caught a criminal. The classroom shift. At Lincoln Middle School, the changes were even more pronounced. In English class, her teacher called her our budding detective when she raised her hand to read. In math, students whispered and nudged each other when she walked in, as if solving equations suddenly mattered less than watching her solve faces. During lunch, her usual seat near the corner windows was no longer lonely. Kids crowded around, peppering her with requests. Draw me! Can you sketch my brother from this photo? Do you think you could draw the guy who stole my cousin's bike? We never caught him. The last question made her freeze. They said it jokingly, but the implication stabbed. Her sketchbook wasn't just a hobby anymore. To them, it was a tool for justice. Emily laughed awkwardly, changing the subject, but the pressure tightened like a rope around her chest. The local gallery. 2 weeks later, Margaret came home holding a letter, her eyes wide. Emily, she said, a gallery downtown wants to feature your work. They saw the news report. Emily blinked. My work? Like my sketches? Yes. They want to display your portraits alongside community art. They say your story could inspire other kids. Part of Emily thrilled at the thought. To see her sketches framed, hanging on white walls beneath bright lights, that was every artist's secret dream. But another part of her recoiled. Her sketches weren't meant for galleries. They were personal, intimate, captured moments she had never intended for strangers. Still, when the gallery weekend arrived, she found herself standing in front of her drawings, surrounded by people murmuring admiration. Look at the detail. Unbelievable for her age. That's the girl from the news. Emily's chest swelled and shrank all at once. Pride and discomfort battled inside her, neither winning. Whispers in the shadows. But not all reactions were kind. Recognition always drew whispers. At the corner store, Emily overheard two customers muttering, "Cops shouldn't be relying on a kid. What if she's wrong? Feels like they're using her for publicity. The words pierced deeper than she expected. She wanted to shout, "I never asked for this. I just drew what I saw." But she bit her tongue, clutching her sketchbook closer to her chest. At school, a few classmates rolled their eyes when teachers praised her. "Teacher's pet," one boy muttered. Another sneered, "Bet she made half of it up. Probably wants to be famous." Emily tried to ignore them, but the doubts clung. What if they were right? What if her memory had betrayed her? What if she had painted herself into a corner where she could never just be normal again? The gift and its cost, drawing, had always been Emily's refuge, a quiet act of creation that belonged only to her. Now, every time she opened her notebook, she felt unseen eyes hovering over her shoulder. Was she sketching for herself or for them? One evening, she sat at her desk, staring at a blank page. She wanted to draw her mother, the tired slope of her shoulders, the lines etched by years of double shifts, but the pencil felt heavy. Instead of joy, she felt expectation. What if the drawing wasn't good enough? What if people thought she'd lost her touch? Tears blurred the paper until she set the pencil down, hands trembling. She whispered into the empty room, "I just wanted to draw. That's all." Community demands. The requests kept coming. The neighborhood barber asked if she could sketch a mural for his shop. The pastor at the local church invited her to draw portraits of parishioners for a fundraiser. A councilwoman even called, suggesting Emily join a Youth Heroes panel for the city. Everywhere she went, people wanted something from her. A face, a sketch, a piece of herself. And though she tried to meet their requests, each one drained her. Her sketchbook filled with drawings that weren't hers anymore. They belonged to the community, to expectations, to the role she had never chosen. The spark of joy. Yet, amid the pressure, small sparks of joy flickered. One afternoon, a group of younger kids from her building knocked on her door. "Emily, can you teach us how to draw?" one asked shyly, holding a stubby pencil. Something softened in Emily. She spread paper on the floor and showed them how to shape an oval into a face, how to shade gently with the side of the pencil, how to look for light and shadow. Their eyes lit up with wonder. For the first time since the robbery, Emily remembered why she loved drawing. Not to catch criminals, not to impress strangers, but to capture and share beauty. That night, she filled a page with the faces of those kids, messy, imperfect, but radiant with joy. For a moment, the burden lightened. Officer Grant returns. A knock sounded late one evening. Officer Grant stood at the door, his expression serious but warm. "Keller's close to being arrested," he told Emily. "Your drawing helped connect him to other robberies. The DA's preparing charges." Emily nodded, relief washing over her, but Grant's gaze lingered. "You okay, kid? You look tired." She hesitated, then whispered, "Everyone wants me to draw. I don't know if I want to anymore." Grant's expression softened. "Listen, Emily. Your gift, it's powerful. But it's yours. Not the police's, not the media's, not even the community's. Use it when you want, not when others demand it. That's the only way it'll stay yours." His words sank deep. She realized she had to reclaim her art, not as a tool, not as a burden, but as the thing that made her Emily. The turning point. That night, Emily opened her sketchbook to a blank page. She drew slowly, carefully. Not a suspect, not a commission, but her mother. The droop of her eyelids, the strength hidden in the lines of her hands, the tenderness she tried to conceal. When she finished, she stared at the portrait. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Emily smiled for the first time in days. The night of the arrest broke with no warning. Emily was at home, curled in her bedroom sketching her mother's portrait again, her favorite subject, her anchor, when the phone rang. Margaret answered in the kitchen, her voice sharp with surprise. "Yes? Oh, thank God." Emily's pencil paused. She heard the murmur of voices, the scrape of a chair. Her mother appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "They caught him," she said softly. "The man, Keller. The police have him in custody." Emily set her pencil down. The words should have felt triumphant, the final stroke in a story that had spiraled beyond her control. But instead, she felt a strange, quiet stillness. "Was it really because of my drawing?" she asked. Margaret crossed the room and knelt by her daughter. "They said your sketch gave them the detail they needed to track him down. Baby, you helped stop him." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe it fully. The aftermath of justice. The next day, headlines splashed across newspapers and television screens. "Suspect arrested in string of robberies, thanks to teen witness." A grainy mugshot of Keller stared out from the page, jaw tight, eyes angry. Emily studied it carefully. Yes, the scar was there. Yes, the chipped tooth. Yes, the same shadows she had captured in graphite. Her sketch had been right. Her eyes had not lied. At school, kids buzzed even louder than before. Some cheered for her, others whispered behind her back, but the effect was the same. Emily was no longer invisible. Her name was attached to something bigger than herself. And yet, instead of pride, she felt the weight of all that attention pressing harder. Even in victory, she longed for quiet. The officer's visit. A week later, Officer Grant returned. This time, he wasn't in uniform. He wore a simple jacket, a little worn at the elbows, as if to say this wasn't official business. Emily opened the door. "Officer Grant?" "Just Grant today," he said with a smile. In his hands was a large frame wrapped in brown paper. "May I?" Emily nodded, stepping aside. He placed the package gently on the kitchen table and unwrapped it. Inside was her sketch. The sketch, preserved beneath glass, mounted on white backing, the edges smooth where she had torn it from her notebook. "I thought you should have the original back," Grant said. "This belongs to you." Emily stared. The drawing looked different now. Not just graphite on paper, but a symbol of what she had done, what she had seen, what she had carried. "Why give it back?" she asked. Grant's eyes softened. "Because tools are only useful when they stay with the person who knows how to wield them. And this isn't just a tool, Emily. It's your gift. Don't let anyone, even us, take it away from you." Tears burned at the back of her eyes. She nodded, unable to speak. Community celebration. The neighborhood organized a small gathering in her honor. Balloons swayed in the church basement. Cookies and soda lined the tables, and everyone, from shopkeepers to teachers to neighbors, came to celebrate the newspaper girl who caught a criminal. They clapped, cheered, lifted her name in praise. Her mother beamed, her art teacher hugged her tight, children asked for her autograph like she was a star. But through it all, Emily remained humble. When asked to speak, she cleared her throat nervously and said, "I didn't do it alone. I just drew what I saw. The police. They did the rest. I only hope this reminds people that anyone, no matter how small or overlooked, can make a difference." Applause thundered. Yet deep inside, Emily thought of the nights she cried, the pencils she snapped, the weight of being seen too much. She realized then, the celebration wasn't just for her bravery. It was for the reminder that talent and courage can live anywhere, even in a girl no one noticed before. The private moment. Later that evening, long after the party ended and her mother had gone to bed, Emily sat by her window. The framed sketch leaned against her desk, catching the glow of the street lamp outside. She opened her sketchbook. Not for the police, not for the news, not for anyone else. Just for her. This time, she drew slowly, savoring each line. She drew her bicycle leaning against the fence, the chipped wicker basket holding papers. She drew the rooftops of her neighborhood, the crooked lines of the apartments, the faces of children chasing a ball. She drew life as she knew it, messy and ordinary, but hers. The joy returned in waves. Her hand flowed with freedom again. No spotlight, no burden, just Emily, pencil, and page. When she finished, she set her pencil down and whispered to herself, "This is who I am." The future beckons. Weeks turned into months. Keller was sentenced, the news cycle moved on, and the city found new stories to chatter about. But Emily's life had changed permanently. Her neighbors still greeted her warmly, but the frenzy faded. At school, the whispers dulled into respect. Her art teacher arranged for her to attend a summer program for young artists downtown. For the first time, Emily considered what a future might look like. Not just delivering newspapers, not just surviving, but thriving through art. One afternoon, her mother asked, "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened? The robbery, the drawing, all of it?" Emily thought long and hard. "Sometimes, yes. But if it hadn't, I don't think I would have believed in myself the way I do now." Her mother kissed her forehead. "That's what matters most." The gift returned. On the last day of school before summer break, Emily walked home slowly, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. The city hummed around her. Buses, laughter, arguments, music spilling from a passing car. She watched it all with the same eyes that had once caught a scar in a blur of motion. She smiled, because she knew now what her gift was really for. Not for catching criminals, not for applause, but for seeing, for noticing the details others missed, for honoring the world with graphite and paper. At her desk that night, she hung the framed sketch above her bed, not as a trophy, not as a burden, but as a reminder that even in 3.5 seconds, a person can see deeply enough to change the course of a city. And as she turned to a blank page, heart light again, Emily felt no pressure, only peace. She began to draw.